How's it going? Welcome to another episode of Alter Life. I'm excited to talk about mental health today. And I have to admit, I feel a little bit nervous, anxious, excited when approaching this topic, just because I know that it's really big. I know that a lot of people think that it's really big and kind of put a lot of weight and opinions and just there's a it's a sticky thing to unravel and unpack to talk about this topic, especially, prefacing this by the spoiler alert. I'm probably going to be ruffling some feathers in this episode. I'm probably going to be contradicting what a lot of people think or believe, the quote unquote mainstream conventional narrative with regard to quote unquote mental health. And yes, the argument that I will be trying to make, and hopefully you're willing to meet me there. And if you're clicking on this and listening to this, I sense that there is some openness. The argument that I'm going to try and make is that there is nothing wrong with you, despite what you may have been told by mental health professionals, quote unquote, and also despite what you may feel. So that's just what we're going to be talking about today is kind of redefining mental health from a place of empowerment. And before we dive into the rambling that I'm sure this episode will encompass, I do want to start with a quote of the day. This quote of the day is by psychologist Carl Rogers. He says, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." And this is really building on what we talked about in last week's episode regarding the universal principles or universal laws of what you resist persists. And the other one being, you can't receive when you are attached. So, really, this quote by Carl Rogers, which is just so practical and also so profound, is that acceptance is the key. Acceptance, and really what acceptance means to me, is unconditional self compassion. Because as I'm sure we'll talk about much more, it's easy to accept ourselves when we look good, feel good, are behaving well. But can we accept ourselves totally and unconditionally? That's the question. So, why does this topic matter to me? Well, I am I'm a human being. And as a human being, I have really struggled. I haven't really shared a lot of my mental, emotional, psychological struggles that I have dealt with pretty much my whole life, and very much less so nowadays. But long story short, I grew up feeling lots of chaos in my internal world, and for sure there was some chaos in my external world as well. But I grew up in this kind of disempowered mindset that there was something wrong with me. And I felt like there was something wrong with me. I always felt like I didn't fit in. I always felt broken in some way or missing something. And quite frankly, that feeling persisted throughout my entire life almost. Well, I should say it's been fading considerably the last 10 or 15 years. But that feeling of something missing, something broken really inspired me in this kind of self-help pursuit. Uh, and I really went down not all of the rabbit holes, but many of the rabbit holes in this world of self-help, which led me to study spiritual psychology, actually. So while I am a quote unquote naturopathic doctor, and maybe you're listening to this thinking, what is this? What is this dude, this naturopathic, natural health guy know anything about mental health? Well, I know a thing or two about mental health because I have experienced huge shifts in my quote unquote mental health. And also, I have studied mental health from a spiritual perspective, which, by the way, a lot of people hear like spiritual psychology. What the heck does that even mean? And it's helpful to remember that psychology is the ology of the psyche, and the psyche is the soul. So fundamentally, psychology is a spiritual pursuit. Yet, in today's day and age, I shouldn't digress too much, but pointing out the fact that psychology and the quote unquote mental health world has essentially pathologized normal human feelings and conditions. States of excitement are even pathologized. States of sadness are pathologized. Everything can be seen through the lens of disorder. And this matters deeply to me because I observe the world of psychiatry, psychology, and mental health practice, if you will. Of course, I'm painting with broad brush strokes here, and I acknowledge that. But generally speaking, there's a complete lack of understanding here that generally does much more harm than good in my observation. And by all means, if you feel good and healthy and empowered in your pursuit of treating yourself in terms of managing your quote unquote mental health disorder, which I'm hoping to debunk the idea that there is such a thing as a quote unquote mental health disorder. But if you feel good in that paradigm, you're probably not listening to this. But if you are, then continue to do what feels good. But I would say, in my observation, in my assessment, 98 out of 100 people who are caught up in that world don't feel good. They don't feel balanced. They don't feel like they're on a sustainable, healthy, resilient, empowered path. They feel dependent on the system. They feel in that victimized relationship. So this is for you. This is for me. This is for us who want to kind of have a deeper, grounded understanding of who we are so that we can live from that place and serve from that place to our full potential, full capacity. And I do find it interesting that, statistically speaking, 1 in 2 people, this is just kind of a Googleable fact. 1 in 2 people will experience a quote unquote mental health disorder in their lifetime. So considering this fact that, again, this is just data, and you also have to ask, like, okay, well, if 1 in 2 people will experience a quote unquote mental health disorder in their lifetime, how about all the people who are quote unquote experience a mental health disorder but not being accounted for? So maybe it's more like 1.75 out of 2 people. I don't know. Or maybe it's more like 2 out of 2 people. Maybe it's everybody in this world experiences a quote unquote mental health disorder in their lifetime, which of course begs the question, even if it's only 1 in 2, but presuming that it's much more than that, considering that not everyone is surveyed here, you got to start asking, like, what is mental health if 1 in 2 people experience mental health disorders? So yeah, it's just something to consider. What is quote unquote normal, and why are we pathologizing everything? So again, I've seen this world of mental health, or this lack of understanding in the world of mental health, do more harm than good. So I'm here to hopefully shake up the thought process, open to new ideas of looking at things and seeing things, again, hopefully from a grounded, empowered place. And before we go any deeper, I do just need to acknowledge that I will just be scratching the surface here. This episode is intended to be a little bit of an introduction into hopefully what will come to be a more expanded conversation in this realm of mental health, mind, thinking, feeling, consciousness, etc. But yeah, so I do want to next get into kind of where mental health, the misunderstanding of mental health seems to be exacerbated. And this is due to the fact that health is compartmentalized. Even terming things mental health and physical health is separating something that is whole. So just that compartmentalization in and of itself is, or can be, damaging to the whole, or to the understanding of the whole. And of course, the compartmentalization of health is a profit driven motive. Like if we have experts and specialists and different sorts of things, and we've got different diagnoses that fit into different specialties things, then we can use those diagnoses and treat those diagnoses. So the whole system, from conventional physical health to conventional mental health, is fundamentally flawed. And the point is that we need to just totally start to rethink the idea and the concept of health in general as being a multidimensional process, that we can't rely upon our experts and our practitioners and our doctors to operate in that system that doesn't exist. We've got to own that understanding within ourselves. And then, yeah, we can choose how to navigate the conventional system if we do choose to do so. But fundamentally, the system, we have to realize that it is flawed. And if we just blindly go about being in that system, working in that system, being treated in that system, we are going to be in that victimized, disempowered relationship. And things are going to be exacerbated because we are just totally missing the mark. And the compartmentalization of mind and body, physical and mental, just keeps things disjointed within people. I know this firsthand. I hear it from so many people. And again, that being said, if you do feel validated for receiving a diagnosis, whether it be a physical diagnosis or a psychological diagnosis, if you feel validated and comforted and secure in thinking and feeling that there's something wrong with you and treating that what you think or feel is wrong, then by all means continue to receive that sort of support. But I do strongly, firmly believe that when we are operating within that system and treating what isn't broken, we actually are at the very best just managing some sort of symptom and just keeping it there. Because just like the conventional physical health system is a system of disease management or symptom management, there's no real intention or economical profit motive to cure or fix or heal. The same is true for the mental health world. Like if we can create all sorts of diseases and disorders, then that's a profitable pursuit. And then we can kind of pick and choose, like, okay, this person falls into this box, and then we can treat them as such. And there's really no intention. I've never really heard of anyone going to a psychiatrist or psychologist or some prescriber and having some, some session, and then coming away from that session being like, okay, you've got this kind of, depression, and we're going to treat this for 6 to 8 months and kind of see how you're doing. No, usually people have quote unquote depression and they're treated for their lifetime. And there's really generally never any conversation around getting off of those medications or, or anything, or any other kind of lifestyle or behavioral or emotional intervention. It's generally a pharmaceutical intervention, which, by the way, can have all sorts of downstream negative consequences or side effects, and kind of create more problems or create problems that didn't even exist. And they create the problems that didn't even exist by treating a symptom that isn't even a problem. So I digress enough. The fact of the matter is that health is a multidimensional process, and you and I are responsible for understanding this and being grounded in our understanding so that we can navigate this physical world and seek support and resources that come from an authentic, grounded sort of place. Just my thoughts, right? All right, let's push pause and share the lesson of the day today. The lesson of the day is, I'll just share it real quick and then I'll unpack a little bit. Objects in consciousness are bigger than they appear. The thoughts and feelings that we have always feel so real inside. And then we express them, we feel them, we bring them into the light, and then we realize that they're kind of nothing to be afraid of, nothing to worry about. Or sometimes they are something to be afraid of or worry about. And then we feel the fear or the worry, and then they're gone. So the lesson of the day, I think this this to some degree has already been a lesson of the day, is to let things flow through us. It's a profound, simple principle that we can orient ourselves towards. But one thing that helps us to let feelings, thoughts, stuff flow is acknowledging that we make these feelings bigger than they actually are. We make these thoughts and beliefs bigger than they actually are, just by nature of keeping them inside and not and kind of suppressing or resisting the thinking or the feeling of them. So yeah, that's the lesson of the day. So do what you will with that lesson. And let me know if you think I'm full of crap and like don't understand any of this stuff. So now I want to talk about redefining mental health. I kind of poked all the holes in the conventional understanding of quote unquote mental health. So what if I'm kind of throwing all that out, then what is mental health? So before we get into what I want to start orienting around the term mental health, I want to share the World Health Organization definition of mental health. According to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables individuals to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well, work productively, and contribute to their community. It's more than the absence of disorder. It includes emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And I totally agree with that. I'm not. I think that's a good kind of starting point to the definition of mental health. But it's also lacking something. How do we do? Like, where does that come from, and how do we get there? It kind of is elusive in terms of that's kind of the goal, but why don't people if that's the goal, then what are the quote unquote disorders, like the lacking the ability to do that? And of course that kind of opens up this whole world of mental health disorders and diseases and diagnoses and dysfunctions and everything like that. And back to the point that apparently, according to data, 1 out of 2 people aren't able to be mentally healthy, or have some sort of mental health disorder at some point in their lifetime. So anyways, I think that this definition is a good starting point, but I think we also need to kind of go deeper in terms of figuring out or asking ourselves, like, where does mental health come from, and how do we access that which we are probably seeking? And there is this notion, fundamentally, that negative feelings, negative thoughts are wrong and bad. And this notion, it's not just something that I come up with, but that's, when people have negative feelings, negative thoughts, they seek support from that, sometimes professional support. They go to the doctor, they go to the psychologist, they go to the counselor, a therapist, whatever. And generally within the conventional system paradigm, those negative thoughts or feelings are affirmed, like, oh yeah, you're feeling this way, you're thinking this way. And after those negative thoughts and feelings are affirmed, then they are treated, pathologized, diagnosed, pathologized, treated. And the problem here, back to kind of where this episode started, is that the problem here is that there's an over pathologization. I think that's a word. Feelings and thoughts are pathologized, and feelings and thoughts, all of them, are part of the normal human experience. So back to that point of 1 out of 2 people, probably more, having a quote unquote mental health disorder at some point in their lifetime. Essentially, there's nothing wrong with anyone. What's wrong with people is that they think there's something wrong with them. And then once they think that there's something wrong with you, then you start to believe that, and you start to pick up and scan the world for all the evidence that something's wrong for you. And you build this picture, this story, that there's something wrong with you. and then you go seek help because you feel like something's wrong with you, and then the person that you're seeking help from, who is probably credentialed and an expert, quote unquote, they are affirming to you that, yeah, there is something wrong with you, and that's okay. We've got a pill for that, and we can manage that, and we can treat that, and we can live with that, which is quote unquote wrong with you. But there's fundamentally nothing wrong with thinking or feeling anything. And I of course, maybe do need to put the caveat that for sure there can be extreme expressions of the human experience. And I fundamentally believe that all of the extreme sides of every spectrum of thoughts and feelings is totally normal, okay, healthy. And I believe that if we orient around the quote unquote extremes as if they are wrong or bad or scary, then they just become wrong or bad or scary. And if we kind of welcome the quote unquote extremes, whether it's extreme anxiety or extreme compulsions or extreme sadness, if we welcome that extreme and normalize that extreme and embrace that extreme and allow that extreme to be felt and heard, back to the lesson of the day, if the objects in consciousness are bigger than they appear, when we see them, look at them, feel them, acknowledge them, be with them, there's really nothing to be scared of. And we realize that, hey, we are actually healthy for feeling, seeing, thinking what we are, because that's just part of the normal expression of being human. So if I could redefine mental health, I would simply define it as the ability to feel what's present, the ability to think what's present, the ability to be with fully, unconditionally what's present. And I think that I know that this is easier said than done because some of the things, again, feel uncomfortable. So we naturally have this tendency to resist or avoid thinking or feeling the quote unquote negative things that are uncomfortable. But we do so, and in doing so, we we create something that doesn't exist. We create mountains out of molehills, and we need not do that. And again, my message here is simply to normalize all aspects, all parts of the spectrum of the human experience. And allowing us to do so, allowing us to feel normal is so healing in and of itself. And it allows us and frees us to take off all of the thoughts and judgments that we have on ourselves. And those thoughts and judgments that we do tend to have on ourselves, especially the quote unquote negative thoughts or negative judgments that we have around our negative attributes or characteristics or thoughts or feelings, then they pile up inside and they create this identity, this narrative, this story that, again, makes us feel like we're wrong or broken or don't fit in. And I know this firsthand. This has been my experience. And so the invitation is to allow ourselves to be with that which we resist and allow ourselves to feel with that which we resist. And that is in and of itself being mentally healthy. So moral of the story here is that, yes, there is nothing wrong with you. And if there was something quote unquote wrong with you, it would just be simply the fact that you think there's something wrong with you and you think that there's something to judge and you think that there's something to criticize or fix. And that just is a self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating entity that is fundamentally manufactured from invisible substance, or the lack of substance, invisible energy. All right, so where are we going to go from here? I know I just kind of unpacked or opened up a bunch of cans of worms, and I don't have time or the bandwidth, and you don't have the time or bandwidth right now to dig into all of these things that we are kind of scratching the surface of. But I do hope to explore this conversation and go deeper in future episodes. I'm thinking of putting together a little bit of a mini series around kind of rethinking, redefining, reimagining mental health from an empowered place. And, you know, I think that I do want to kind of hit the pause button here and kind of let all this information simmer and percolate for the next week, so that we can kind of jump back in from this foundational place of understanding that, yeah, like the way that we're thinking about things are broken. So how can we think about things differently? And just a little teaser. Some of the ways that we can think about things differently is, we can start to really question the validity of the thoughts that come through us. you know is that true? Is that real? Is that right? Is that does that make sense? So we can start to question these things. We can start to raise curiosity, and fundamentally, I guess the first part is just to start to be more aware of that internal dialogue, and to be more welcoming of and sensitive to those thoughts and feelings, because there is this natural societal kind of tendency to just try to feel good, and anything that isn't quote unquote good or positive or happy or content, then we have to like keep away and resist and manage and fix, or just figure out how to deal with it. So yeah, just some things to feel into for the next week. And some practices or exercises that we can do, which is going to lead us to the challenge of the day here. But one of the kind of hallmark signs of, hey, like, that's not true, is when you hear yourself or you hear another person say, I am blank. I am anxious, I am depressed, I am a failure, I am not good enough, or even I am tired. you know, I think it sounds so silly and so simple and so meaningless, but I firmly believe it's also so powerful to just slip in the word feeling. I am feeling anxious. I am feeling depressed. I am feeling sad. I'm feeling like a failure. I'm feeling like I'm not good enough, because that simple word of I am feeling this in implicitly and powerfully portrays that this is an impermanent state, because feelings by their very nature are fleeting. And the curious thing about feelings is, once you say I am sad, once you say I'm anxious, then that feeling kind of like starts to dissipate in that moment. Once we bring our awareness to that feeling, it's kind of gone, or at least it loses its grip entirely in an instant. So that's the curious thing about these thoughts and feelings. And it's also curious in an empowering, kind of exciting sort of way, at least to me. Tell me what you think. So bringing us to wrap up with the challenge of the day here. Challenge of the day is create space. Create space to think or feel differently. So yeah, when you find yourself thinking or feeling or saying or hearing someone else say, I am blank, do your best to catch yourself and slip in the feeling word. I am feeling blank right now. And maybe like the bonus extra credit is, once you say or feel I am feeling blank right now, then kind of follow up. Now, how am I feeling? I'm feeling a little bit less blank right now, just because I am creating the space to be with the blank. So that's the funny thing, is that when we get more sensitive to feelings, when we get better at feeling stuff, then the feelings pass, like sometimes in an instant. In fact, I believe they pass always in an instant. And sometimes it's just the thoughts, the recurring thoughts that kind of try to grab onto that feeling, like, hey, I'm not done feeling blank. But you can just let yourself be as you are, right? Yeah, I hope you're not feeling too overwhelmed right now by kind of shaking up the conversation and kind of bringing up new ideas, new concepts. And if you do feel overwhelmed, or if you do feel like, oh, I'm lost, why am I listening to this? You know, let yourself to try and think a little bit less about stuff and just let yourself try to feel into it, and let yourself kind of be pulled towards all the things and people and situations and circumstances, and also the internal thoughts and stuff inside. Let yourself be pulled to what brings you into a state of peace and connected with your true self. I think fundamentally that's what life is for learning how to stay connected. I was about to say reconnect, but we're never disconnected. So, learning how to experience that connection with our true self, which is grounded, peaceful, healthy, wise, resilient, compassionate, loving. That's your true self. So, allow yourself be pulled to that feeling, and hopefully, tuning into this sort of stuff allows you to feel that way. And if it doesn't, hit the pause button or shut it off. But if it does, keep on keeping on. And thank you so much for tuning in, sharing your presence with me for this episode. And I look forward to staying in touch and seeing you guys next time on the next episode of Alter Life. And until next time, keep thriving.